Okay, so let's start with the first question. First and foremost, we were so delighted to see that you were in DC. You are the chairwoman, or correct me wrong, the correct title of African American Mayors Association, and you had a wonderful conference there. And I know that you met with President Biden at the White House and discussed so many different issues. And was a real, there's a lot of issues that are happening right now. And what I love, what you say all the time, is that mayors are the frontliners of when it comes to community outreach. They're the first that people think about when there's an issue in the community. So because we're a national security organization, we like to talk about national security issues. And everything is national security pretty much. Most domestic issues are national security. So the one thing we want to talk about is definitely the gun violence issue, across America. That's been a huge problem. And I know recently you had a situation in your community, and it's a very unfortunate. We prayers to the family that lost the young man that died from gun violence. And then we know that you're an activist and you've been that for quite some time. So we want to just ask you about, what have you been working on in terms of helping to fight against gun violence? And also, you can even talk about how we recently brought up about the importance of having the hip hop community involved in anti-gun violence initiative. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, the city of Mount Vernon is 4 square miles. On the census, it says 75,000, but we did that census in the height of COVID, and we know that there are closer to about 105,000 people in our community. So we are one of the most densely populated communities in the country. We are 62 to 63% of African diaspora, and we are about 26% Hispanic Latino, and 11 to 12% Native American, Asian Pacific Islander, and Caucasian. We average about 6 to 8 homicides per year, right? But what we're seeing right now that is different is that we are seeing young people who are engaging and who are the victims and the perpetrators of this gun violence. And so, we've had a 14-year-old killed this year. We've had an 18-year-old killed this year, and we had a 19-year-old killed. The 19-year-old was killed at the hands of a knife and not a gun. But the 3 homicides that we have had in our city, which is a lot for this time of year, are 14, 18, and 19. And so one of the things that we know is that guns and weapons are too readily accessible to our young people, whether it's on the internet or whether it's the iron pipeline that comes up 95 from Florida and Georgia and North and South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland and Pennsylvania, that we have a lot of illegal guns that are pouring into our community and that our young people are getting their hands on them. And so the easy accessibility to guns, illegal guns, combined with our country's mental health crisis, really, and just emotional immaturity, because who is mature at 14 and 18 and 19? Not many of us were. We're seeing a different trend in the gun violence, like I said, it being young people. And so here in the state of New York, we have some of the most stringent gun laws, and, there are red flag laws. You have to be screened. We're not producing guns here in the state of New York, but yet the illegal guns are flowing into our community. And so we are partnering with several agencies. We are partnering with the ATF. And so the ATF, we work with them and their NIBIN system. And so we look at the ballistics of any guns that have been fired, so we can see if that weapon has been used in something else. They've been helping us do gun tracing and tracking, as well as retrieval of guns. We work with the FBI. We work with the DEA, as well as the U.S. Marshal's Office. And so we have a small police department, and we're very under-resourced. And so we've been taking advantage and partnering with quite a few of our federal partners, like I said, FBI, DEA, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals. And we are pulling record numbers of guns off of our streets. Why? Because record numbers of guns are flowing into our community. And that is definitely a national security issue. When we heard about the massacre in Buffalo, that same person had Mount Vernon on the list. We were just about 20 miles further from him than Buffalo. And so he decided to go to Buffalo. See, we were on the list. And it's scary to know that anyone is looking at our community as a place for domestic terrorism, or racism. And so we have to find a way to hold the gun industry accountable. Because they know that their guns are being sold illegally. They know that they're dealing with bad actors insofar as, the gun shop owners who are allowing people to come in there and buy 10, 15 guns, and then they're back the next week to buy another few guns because, their guns were lost at the gym or someone broke into their car. Well, how many times is your car going to get broken into? And one of the conversations that we had is the gun industry can do something about this really easily. Just like when iPhones were being stolen because they were popular, then all of a sudden you had to have your fingerprint or your face print. So a gun was, the iPhone was locked. If it was stolen, it could be locked remotely. And we have technology now. And we know that the gun industry, if they really didn't want illegal guns to be out on the street, that they can create guns going into the future with technology that can lock that gun from a remote place, or that trigger can't be released unless the person's fingerprint matches the fingerprint of someone who brought them. But that's not their concern. They're more interested in the green than they are concerned about the red blood that is running down the streets in our communities. And so religion or culture really, really attacking our communities. And so the threat from outside is no longer, in my mind, as great as the threat from inside because of intolerance and bigotry.
Right. I want to go back.
I'm sorry. Then the other thing that we're doing is we are a community that understands that gun violence is a public health issue. And so we have community violence interrupters and we work with them. And then we additionally work with organizations like Moms Demand Action, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and Students Demand Action as well for advocacy.
Just going back to just kind of expanding more on the, key stakeholders. We talked about how hip hop is really important for a stakeholder like hip hop to get involved. So, and I know that you were definitely interested in the initiative. So I just wanted to talk to you more about why would you support an initiative like Hip Hop Against Gun and Gang Violence?
Well, because, people are driven by popular culture, right? Different groups of people are influenced and look different to different people. And so we know hip hop has been around for now 50 years. It's the 50th anniversary of hip hop. And years ago, many of our hip hop artists became involved in movements to really address gun violence in their communities. And so, they're still here and they want to reach out to our young people. Our young people are driven very much by the culture. And so you want to leverage them. They have lived experience. Many of these artists come from communities that have been impacted by gun violence and that they can speak to the issues. A lot of these kids become involved because they want to be connected. They want to be credible. They want to feel safe in their communities. Mm-hmm. And so we really need to speak to the real issues. And preachers can reach some people, or, artists can reach some people. Educators and social workers can reach others. And so you have to make sure that you are leveraging the resources and the talents and the interests of different ones who want to reach our young people.
Right. And please also mention how there's a historic aspect when it comes to the creation of hip hop in Mount Vernon.
Absolutely. I graduated from high school in 1986, so I'm 55, right? And so I think hip hop has been a part of my life, most of my life. That's the genre of music, other than R&B and classic soul that I grew up in. And so here in Mount Vernon, we have Heavy D and the Boys are here from Mount Vernon. Eddie F., who has gone on to be a super producer and produced for Babyface, Tony Dofat. We have Pete Rock and CL Smooth. We have I&I. Right next door to us, we have the brand new Indians, in
Right.
Neurotel, and DMX was actually born in Mount Vernon and later moved to Yonkers. And so we have a very rich music culture here in the city of Mount Vernon. And they still have a lot of impact. Not everyone is interested in working a 9 to 5. And so, we have really re-engaged a lot of these artists again to kind of come back and mentor and train, encourage and give direction to our ever-present artist community. And so Mount Vernon does have a rich history of hip hop.
Great. So thank you so much for that response. Moving along, I would like to talk about COVID-19 and food security. And we're just going to just ask you one quick question on, we are 3 years in, with regards to the start of the COVID-19, and it has provoked so many challenges in many communities. And what I would like to just ask you about is, what is the state of Mount Vernon involving COVID-19 right now? And then also, how are you handling the food insecurity issue in your community?
Well, while Mount Vernon is not the largest city in Westchester, we do have the largest home delivered meals for our seniors and those who are homebound. We also continue to give out tons, thousands of tons of food to our residents. We are one of the biggest providers of fresh produce, as well as, some of your basic staples like beans and rice and things of that nature. But we give out a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. We also help to support 14 food pantries and soup kitchens here in the city of Mount Vernon. And we've set aside about $500,000 of our American Rescue Plan money, for which we'll be giving to some of our soup kitchens and food pantries. Additionally, when we talk about food insecurity, we just talk about hunger, but addressing hunger is not enough. When you have communities who are disproportionately impacted by diabetes and hypertension, we have to make sure that the food that we are giving out to the community is healthy. And so working with our Feeding Westchester, which is our county's food bank that provides food to a lot of the communities, what we do is we have provided them with additional funding so that they can focus on providing diabetes and hypertension bags, bags that don't have as much sodium, don't have as much sugar, because we want people to eat, but we also want, the same people who are hungry are also the same people oftentimes who are at greatest risk for preventable chronic diseases, which just complicates the matter. And so we're not just addressing the food insecurity, we're addressing the health of the food, because we don't want the unintended consequences of feeding people to be, diabetes and hypertension and having to be on dialysis because what we gave them was unhealthy. And some people say, well, at least they are not dying because of hunger. Well, some of these other preventable diseases can do more damage than we'd want to happen. We are a part of, we also partner with DoorDash because we are a part of the White House's Office of Food Policy and Hunger Elimination. And so we've been doing with the White House, and we are one of, I believe, 12 or 13 communities who is part of a special initiative around eliminating hunger in urban communities. And so Mount Vernon is one of the communities that it's been selected and is working with the White House on addressing this issue in our communities.
Right. Wow. Interesting. So going back to COVID-19, I know like significantly there's been a reduction of the number of cases. But as far as like what you're seeing with the impacts of people who've been impacted from COVID-19 and a way forward, looking in the future, preparing for a future pandemic, where does Mount Vernon stand on that point of view?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that we have here is, like in many urban communities around the country, our hospital has been trying to close for 4 years. So we've really been fighting against the closure of our hospital, because being a community of color of about 89 to 90% and having a lot of preventable, health issues, we cannot afford for our hospital to close. And so that really is a challenge that we have in trying to prepare for future pandemics. But some of the things that we have done, right? Because the federal government had enough foresight. They increased CDBG dollars during the COVID pandemic, and so we saw a hit to our ambulances, and our ambulances responding. Our ambulances were overwhelmed, and so what we've done is we've purchased 4 ambulances for our community, and we fully equipped them. And we're using CDBG CARES money to cover the purchase of those. And then we use some of our ARPA money to make sure that we're able to staff those ambulances. And so, that's how we are trying to expand our capacity to deal with future health crises. We've been working with the Westchester County Neighborhood Health Center now, which is a federally qualified health center. And we have testing, even dealing with monkeypox. We were able to quickly stand up monkeypox education, outreach, and testing, because like you said, we don't know the next thing that is coming down the line. But I do believe as a city, we have put together an infrastructure where we've broken down the silos of city government. All of our forward-facing organizations like the Youth Bureau, the Department of Recreation, the Office of the Aging, as well as the Veterans Service Agency, all turned into kind of like the Bureau of Human Services. And so everything people, and getting resources and housing and food and financial assistance and mental health services and connecting them to medical resources were handled by them. Of course, the public safety was still addressed by police and fire and the Office of Emergency Management. But, COVID did cause us to rethink how government operates and really partner with stakeholders in the faith-based, the business, and the civic community, so that we are prepared to respond not only to medical incidences, but weather emergencies that we see happening more and more because of climate change, and really building out our emergency response in our community.
So as far as your, responding to natural disasters within your community, this is one question we like to ask all the time, because climate change is a national security threat, and it does create ongoing issues for many communities across the nation. So depending on where, like the locality of the city or the area within the United States, it can be really devastating, or it could be a lot easier to respond to a climate change issue, like, for instance, flooding, heavy raining issues, other hurricanes. So we just wanted to talk to you about what is it like as far as responding to these type of natural disasters, and what are some climate change initiatives you're working on or anti-climate change issues you are working on in the community.
So some of the climate change initiatives that we're working on in the community is really replacing our tree canopy, right? As like many urban communities, as trees have grown and gotten big and broken up sidewalks or messed up people's sewer or lines and water lines, people end up cutting down trees and getting rid of trees, and trees haven't always been replanted. And so we're actually in the process of applying for an urban forestry grant here in the city of Mount Vernon, working also with our school district that has a greenhouse, and working with our tree crew to kind of help them grow some trees that we can add each year, as the trees become like little saplings and they're ready to be planted, and put those in our community. I believe this year we're going to plant about 200 trees in Mount Vernon, and we really want to get to a place where we can plant, closer to 1,000, because we really need to cover that tree canopy. And why are tree canopies important? because there can be a 5 to 7 degree difference
Wow.
in an area or a neighborhood where you don't have trees as to a place, a neighborhood that is shaded. And so again, when you're talking about urban communities and you're talking about poor people, if it's 5 to 7 degrees hotter in your neighborhood, then guess what you're going to have to run? You're going to have to run more electricity to cool down your apartment or your house, which is going to add to your electric costs. And in a climate where people are, precariously perched on the brink of bankruptcy and struggling just to make their ends meet, having to pay extra money to cool your house is challenging. We are working on thermal heat pumps. And so we're looking to use our wastewater, our sewer water, and be able to capture the heat from that to be able to heat different buildings. Again, kind of reducing our carbon footprint in our community. And we do have major flooding issues. We have major flooding issues because we are surrounded by the Bronx River, the Hutch River, the Sprain, and we have 3,000, water catch basins in our community that go to 74 what they call outfalls. And these outfalls bring the water that goes through our storm drains into the Hutchinson and the Bronx River. The challenge is that the Hutch and the Bronx River haven't been dredged for years. And so they've become more and more shallow. And so when you get big incidences of torrential downpours in a very short period of time, those rivers overflow, meaning there's nowhere for our stormwater to go. And our stormwater backs up into the system. It pops our sewer caps and our, caps in the middle of the street, and you have geysers. But more importantly, what it really, really does to, like we said, families who are already struggling, is it floods their homes. And basements are being wiped out. And sometimes, water even goes from the basement all the way up to the first floor, and people losing all of their heat, electric, washer and dryer, all of that infrastructure and that equipment that they have in their house. And so some of what we've been doing in our region, because it's more than a Mount Vernon issue, it's a regional issue. And our Congressman Jamal Bowman, our Senator Chuck Schumer, and our Senator Kirsten Gillibrand brought the Army Corps of Engineers to our community.
Good.
So the Army Corps of Engineers has come so that we can really start looking at a long-term solution for how to expand our stormwater capacity. And then we also have an aging stormwater system that's been crumbling. It's over 100 years old and it's vitrified clay. And so we've been working with the state of New York as well as the Biden administration to tap into some of the, infrastructure money. And so we've received about $163 million for our very small community because our system is just that bad and in that bad of shape. So, climate change is real. And, people can't deny that it shouldn't be 90 degrees in April, and then all of a sudden it drops to 50 degrees again in May. That's just backwards. And these 100-year storms are now becoming annual storms that so many communities have to prepare for. And so working with the African American Mayors Association, the Environmental Defense Fund, the Wildlife Federation, and a lot of different environmental groups, I've had to learn a lot about climate change, and we are hardening our systems like our electric and our heat and our gas. So when these type of storms do come, that those systems are not down for as long as they, have been in the past, or that they don't fail at all. It's very challenging, and I've said, and I'll be very honest with this. I don't think historically Black people have been environmentalists.
Right.
We have. Historically, we, in many of our communities, we're more focused on violence, housing, education, access to healthcare, good transportation, jobs, economic development, things like that. And, being an environmentalist was about tree huggers. And we didn't pay attention to it. But just like anything else that happens and becomes a crisis in America, you know, when one community gets a cold, we get the flu. It hits us worse. And
It
so,
sure does. Yes,
so
I know,
having
you know,
those,
disproportionately is hitting a lot of African American communities, especially with the water security issue.
the water security issue and also the air quality. And so, you know, that's another major environmental issue and climate change issue that we have to deal with. Because it's actually, as it gets hotter in our neighborhoods, because we don't have the tree canopy, you know, asthma rates, which happen to be disproportionately high in our community, and other respiratory issues, our residents suffer with them. And because, you know, in our communities, you usually have garbage incinerators and lots of public transportation and you know, more carbon being emitted in our communities, our air quality is generally worse. And so when you take air quality that is already poor and you add extra heat to it because of climate change, it definitely has an impact on respiratory disease like asthma, COPD, sarcoidosis, and things of that nature in our community. So we no longer have the luxury, as Black people, of saying that we're not tree huggers. We have to become tree huggers quickly, because it's the trees that is going to shade our communities, keep the temperatures down, and to help improve our air quality for our residents.
Wow, I'm pretty sure your perspective changed so much once you became mayor and like started looking into the issue as involving the impacts of climate change. So I know you've evolved a lot and had to catch up on learning more and more about the issue, because there's just so many two, three, third, excuse me, a lot of effects from it. Just 1 second, third order of effect, excuse me, from all these, you know, from the impacts of it. And then also too, you have the situation where your infrastructure has to be able to keep up with the impacts. So I know that that's a issue overall, but you sound really well and versed on how bad the impacts are and how to respond to them. One last question I do have, Memorial Day weekend is coming up, and, you know, I'm a veteran, and veteran military families, members of military families really means a lot to me. So wanted to just get, you know, just hear your perspective about, you know, veterans in your community, and what are you guys doing for Memorial Day weekend? But overall, you know, the role of the veterans community, veterans group in your community.
Absolutely. So on that, you know, on Memorial Day, we will start out at 8:30 in the morning on City Hall Plaza, having our Memorial Day ceremony and our wreath laying. Here on our plaza, we have monuments for the foreign wars, and we lay wreaths at each of them. Our electeds kind of, you know, give speeches, and they acknowledge the sacrifice of those who sacrificed all for the freedom of our country. And, you know, regardless of some of the internal challenges that we have as Americans, we have people who are fighting on foreign soils for our rights every day. And we have to acknowledge those who have lost their lives. You know, our Gold Star mothers are here and front and center. And then at 10 a.m., we will kick off our Memorial Day parade, where our veterans will be lifted up, our VFW, our auxiliaries will be present, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, different community groups. It's a challenge. Memorial Day and Veterans Day ceremonies have become more challenging because people don't come out the way they used to, as you know, in the 60s and 70s, being closer to World War II, being closer to the Vietnam War and the Korean War, you had greater participation, but we're not finding the community coming out as much as they have in the past. And so we're really, really doing every effort to push that, because we want not only our veterans, but the families of those who have lost loved ones in military service to know that their sacrifice is not in vain, and that we fully support them. And then, you know, throughout the day, our VFW, we have 3 veterans posts here in Mount Vernon, and they will be having events and ceremonies and outings And then as well as our fire department. Our fire department at their headquarters does a really kind of big cookout and day of acknowledgement, because we have a lot of our firefighters are veterans. And so, you know, we never want to forget. My fire commissioner, Deborah Norman, did 27 years in the Army. And so, you know, we keep the memory of those who've been lost alive, and we respect the solemnity of the day, and acknowledge our those who have given their lives, and then those who have served. And we know Memorial Day and Veterans Day are separate, but we still use that day as an occasion to remember our veterans as well.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your response. And it is true. Because there's such a sharp decline of young men and women joining the military, and only less than 1% of our population serves. I think that's also contributing to the lack of participation. So, but thank you so much for continuously having these events and recognizing our service. And, you know, many of us have sacrificed our lives, especially in wars, and we must not forget about that exceptional group of people. And also, too, the reason why we bring up the veterans community issue, because veterans at the end of the day contribute to our national security, making sure that they protect us at all times. So, well, Mayor Howard, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation about national security in your community. And we will be posting this soon. But before we do that, we'll definitely make sure we pass along to your community. But if there's, to your office. But if there's anything else you want to talk about as far as national security, we can bring it up right now. But do you have any last remarks?
I guess the last thing that I want to speak about is national security is also, you know, cyber yes. terrorism. And so as governments, we have to make sure that our systems and our networks are secure, and that we are not being, you know, that hackers are not getting into our system, and being able to steal identity and get information and secure information. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, while we have boots on the ground, we also have people who are sitting behind computers, who are working very hard to protect our nation, protect our cities, and protect our privacy, and make sure that we can't be impacted that way. It's not easy. National security is ever moving and ever changing. It's not a steady target. And so I want to just thank you for the work that you and your team do here in working on national security issues and uplifting them. And the bottom line is, as people, we have to be vigilant. We have to make sure that we are situationally aware, and that we're always paying. We don't have to be paranoid, but we do have to pay attention to who's around us, what happens, you know, whether we're traveling or we're at an event. And that's something that we continue to try and educate our community about, is just making sure that they're aware. And as they, you know, we phrased the phrase a few years ago, if you see something, say something, right? There are people around who know how to handle and address these issues. And oftentimes people will say after something happens, well, I didn't think this could happen, or I didn't think that can happen. Well, you know, just tell someone and bring them into the situation. Caution is better than regret, right? And so if we're cautious on the front end, then there's less that we have to regret on the back end. National security is all of our jobs, not just the military. You know, it is our jobs as American citizens to support the efforts of security every day in our country. So again, thank you for the work that you do. Now, thank you. You're on the outside.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great.
Take care.
Okay. You too. Okay. Bye-bye.